My name is Dr. Aopolgetics. I'm an old engineer, and I'm going to give you the top 4 summary arguments for God based on references. I'll try to keep my language and points simple so that they're easy to understand. So do you believe in God, and can you give answers for why you believe that support your belief? This is the subject of apologetics. Reasons for our belief. There are basically 2 reasons for apologetics. One is to strengthen the faith of believers, and the second is to convince non-believers. In our world today, the idea of naturalism and just matter and energy and science governing everything is very prevalent, and we need something to counter that. I used Norm Geisler's argument in his book that says that his book is titled, "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist." And basically, it really takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to believe in God. I can illustrate this argument briefly from the circle diagram. Basically, we draw a circle. A big circle can represent all the knowledge in the world. And then we can ask our person we're interviewing to make a circle of how big his knowledge is alone. And he may make a small circle like this. And then the point can be made, how can you say there is no God, because he could exist somewhere in the big circle of knowledge that we don't know, because we can't know everything. Also, there is the idea, the four summary arguments then I will present. The first is that how did the world become created and all of life become created, rather than there being nothing at all? And Leibniz and other philosophers have asked this question, and the logical idea is that something outside of the universe caused it, was the first cause that created it. It couldn't just have caused itself and sprung into existence from nothing. I could use the argument of having a ball as a prop, just to make a simple prop. This ball, we know, had a beginning, and it was created in a factory by human design. We could make the argument then that scientists show that the universe had a beginning. They date it, and most scientists think that that was the beginning of space and time at the creation of the universe. So then it is logical that something outside of space and time, outside of the universe, created it. It had to have a first cause, because everything that has a beginning has a cause. That's logical, isn't it? So that would point to God, wouldn't it? Very strong pointing to God. It's difficult to escape that argument. The second argument then is, why is there so much beauty and order and design in the universe? You see that everywhere. Just take, for example, the sun is a certain energy and mass, and also the earth and the moon. And all this is in perfect balance. And if the energy, the mass, or the distances of any of those bodies were changed just slightly by a fraction of a percent, then we no longer have life on Earth. And in fact, there are other scientists like Geisler and Meister have shown that there are 50 scientific constants that are very finely tuned for life and for the existence of our laws in the universe. These 50 scientific constants and laws, like the speed of light and others, are very precise. But if they're just changed again by a slight percent, the universe no longer works and we no longer have life. So how can we have all this design and beauty without a designer? The third argument then is the moral argument, and that we sort of are obliged to do good and avoid evil, aren't we? We just sort of have that wired into us. Even remote tribes have that idea. So basically God has put a moral conscience into us, hasn't he? We have a sense of right and wrong. And we also have the Bible and the Ten Commandments and his guidance that he's just planted into us, along with our sense of reason. So, absent God in the Bible, we have moral relativism, which is popular today. And then, with that belief, one can just, a given element of society, a given government, a given group of people can just make whatever laws they choose. Basically, man rules the law. And then we result in moral relativism. It's difficult to have an absolute standard for that. So when we get into difficult questions about abortion, homosexuality, end-of-life questions, what is our standard? Is it just what's best for most people, or is it really a true standard? So we see we don't have much moral standards, and if we take the examples, some elements of society even today have very poor moral standards by our judgments or by the Bible. Some mistreat women at much lower standards than they do men, for example. Going back in history, in Hitler's time, that society made laws that they could exterminate the Jews, also somewhat insane and weakly people, and they proceeded to do that. So that was an example of moral relativism. They were strong believers in evolution and naturalism. Extending that argument, there's also really no meaning or purpose for life without God. Life becomes sort of absurd. This sort of random movements of molecules, if we evolved from apes, what meaning is there for life, whatever we make it to be? And the fourth argument then is our consciousness and sense of reasoning and memory and our senses. Basically, we have to think that our senses are reliable, and that God put the sense of reason in us. He created the universal laws of mathematics and of logic, and these extend throughout the universe. They're true on Mars and Pluto, everywhere. If the laws of math were not, say, true on Pluto, or why would they be if it's just a creation of our mind? There's no minds on Pluto. So they have to be universal, and philosophers have held this for years, that laws of logic and math are universal. As even our morals somewhat universal. Also, man has this, psychologists have found man has this ability of creative retrospection and prospection. We can basically look back in the past and see what we did wrong, what we didn't like about our life, and we can look ahead to the future and plan to do better, what we'd like to do better. This ability of looking back and planning ahead is unique to man. It's not found in computers or in animals. We also have somewhat of a spiritual tendency. We want to worship God. We also ask questions like, who am I? Why am I here? These are Descartes, the great philosophers, have said, I think, therefore I am. So these are profound questions that only man asks, and God has somewhat planted those in us, along with our sense of reasoning and logic. So isn't it wonderful that God answers all these questions? A reason, for purpose for being, for why there's universal laws, why there's creation. He's even given us the hope of eternal life. But if we take away God and the Bible and this idea, then we're sort of left with the idea of naturalism, humanism, atheism, and it becomes somewhat illogical and even abstract, sort of a charade. I'll just give a few examples of what would happen then. For example, if we had that philosophy, we would assume that nothing produces everything, and it's an ongoing, sustaining process. And we would have to assume non-life produced life, and that violates the law of biogenesis in the dictionary. It says life can only come from life. So they're sort of like magic. These things just spring up from nothing, random movements of molecules and atoms into life. Chaos and randomness produces the information codes and DNA, and scientists think these are very precise information codes, DNA is, and how could this huge complex information code spring up just from chaos? It doesn't make sense. Again, magic. Unconsciousness produces consciousness and our questioning nature. Again, magic. And local non-reason produces universal laws of logic. All of this becomes somewhat nonsensical and magical to follow this to its logical conclusion.